right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a quorum present. There's a couple of other people that are going to come in, so I think we'll call the meeting to order. It is, 7:06. Come on in, Sarah. Okay, 7:06. Sarah is here. Okay, Mike. Okay. This is our first meeting of this session for PZNH. We have a lot of new members here, so I thought we would start by introducing ourselves before we get into the business of quick approval of minutes from last time for those that are present. And then we have Steve Olvani, the chair of Planning and Zoning, to come and give us an overview. We have a lot of new members about what the outlook is for 2020 and just an open Q&A session. So we have no real business to vote on for today. But I thought it would be good to ground everybody in what we all should keep our eye on as this committee. All right, I'll start. I'm Amy Barsanti. This is my 4th year, I think, on the RTM. Been a vice chair for Planning and Zoning and Housing, and now the chair recently for this year. So be kind to me as I sort through the role. I'll hand it off to Susan.
I'm Susan Larson. I've been on the RTM, I think it's 5 years now, and Park and Rec before this.
Okay.
And so I thought it was time for a little bit of change.
Okay.
I lived in Darien for 25 years now, and happy to be here.
Good.
I'm Caroline Luz, and this is my 3rd or 4th year on PZNH.
Okay.
I've been on lots of things. I've been on the RTM for a very long time with a time off and Park and Rec Commission, so a lot of time on town stuff.
Good.
I'm Amy Chickles. I'm also the clerk, so I keep the minutes, and if I ask you your name, I'm sorry, because it's hard for me to remember everybody's name, but this is my, I guess, starting 4th year on both RTM and Planning, Zoning, and Housing.
Catherine Bailey. This is my 2nd year on the RTM and 1st year in planning.
Terrific.
I'm Jan Raymond. This is my 2nd round on the RTM. This is my 1st meeting of my 2nd tour on the RTM. The last one was up right before I went on the Board of Ed, so that would have been 1983. So a few things have changed. My most recent town position was chairman of the Darien Housing Authority while we were building the 2 new developments in town.
Terrific. You're going to have great perspective to add to the committee. It's great.
We'll see. A lot of years.
That's good.
Some with him.
Some with me, guilty as charged. Michael Castello. This is I'm new to the RTM, but this is my 3rd tour onto the RTM. Once before I was on the Board of Ed and once after I was on the Board of Ed. Mm-hmm. Lived in town on and off since '91. In between '91 and now, there were 2 stints in San Francisco Bay Area. We kept coming back. We're back for good. And I'm an architect by training, but my career, other than the first few years, has been in commercial real estate.
Okay. Terrific.
I'm Sarah Baldwin, District 1 with Amy. I think this is my 5th year on RTM. I honestly don't really remember. This is my first time on this committee. I've been in Darien for 6 years, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. That's an exciting background, unfortunately. So, yeah. Excited to be on
But
this
new mom,
committee.
you've got your
Got that.
hands covered.
Yeah, got that.
Your work cut out for you right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the big
That's
job.
not that's taken lightly.
I did that too.
All right. First, we're just going to approve the minutes of the people that were here. These are minutes from back from September. Because we didn't have meetings subsequently. So, of the people that were in the minutes present, Amy Chickles, Carolyn Bain, Caroline Luz, Linda Terhune, Mike Wheeler, and Marcy. So we actually don't have a quorum to approve that, so we will continue on. Okay, the reason we're here tonight is to just all get grounded on what we as a committee should be following. Mr. Steve Olvani is going to give us a overview of your commission and what's facing you and the highlights and challenges that you see for the year ahead.
Challenges?
Yeah, it's,
Challenges.
No challenges.
He never
Come
goes,
closer.
Come closer, yes.
he never goes to challenge, Steve.
Not at all. Thank you, Amy, for inviting me. I appreciate it. I've been probably in town government something like, 10 or 12 years, I think. My old neighbor Gene Coyle got me into the RTM way back when, and Gene's plaque's on the wall. He passed me like 3 years ago. And I was on one committee, and then I bet you ended up on the planning, zoning, and housing committee for a bunch of years. But I like town government. It's fun. I've been on the planning zoning commission for I think 6 years. And prior to the year prior to that, I was on the zoning board of appeals. The planning zoning commission is, and then I was elected chairman this year. Prior to that, I was vice chairman. The planning zoning commission, I'd like to call it the real estate department of Darien. A lot of the other boards kind of sort of report up to us, which is Architecture Review Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals, and then also the EPC Commission. So those 4 boards and us all end up in the building, in the Planning Zoning Director's office, along with the building department. We interface with those guys every once in a while on certain items. On my commission, there's 6 people. There's 6 seats on it. Right now there's 4 Republicans and 2 Democrats because of what's it called?
Minority party.
Minority
Party
representation.
rules.
Right.
It can't be 5-1. It can be 3-3, or it can be 4-2 or 2-4. But it's really it's kind of more of a nonpartisan board, because being, there's between a Democrat and Republican, it doesn't matter. Either you want a school, you don't want a school, you want the Road Heights, you don't want the Heights. It really doesn't come into play at all, to be honest with you. I am a trained real estate professional. I've been in the real estate business for 30-some years, even though I'm not that old. It's hard to say that. But,
What did he say?
Even though he's not that old.
I still feel like I'm 40. I had 30 years in the business. I'm like, oh, it's crazy.
Steve, I'm with you.
I hear you. I'm a licensed and certified appraiser in the state of New York and the state of Connecticut, and I'm a licensed broker in the state of New York and the state of Connecticut. My career started in New York City in '88 when my daughter was born. In 2000, I moved my office up here to Stanford, but I've always worked in the Hudson Valley, Westchester County market for years. Our commission has a lot of different things that we kind of work on. We probably have somewhere between 30 and 35 meetings a year. There's 3 meetings scheduled at least every single month. You take a month off, we don't work, and we technically don't work in August or December, so it's 3 meetings times 10 months. But there's always a couple thrown in there every once in a while.
Busy
Yeah,
commission.
it's a busy commission.
Yeah.
I think the Board of Selectmen only meets once every 2 weeks, something like that. But it's fun. There's a lot of stuff that our commission does, I think, relative to commercial versus residential. I think it's kind of 70% residential, 30% commercial. Relative to the commercial side, for me, it's easy, since I've been in the real estate business so long, looking at plans and designs, and I can tell something that's good really quickly, and I can tell something that's bad pretty quickly too. We try not to redesign things, but we do make pretty pointed suggestions, and can extend a hearing or a planning process over time, and miraculously buildings change. Case in point was the Royal, which is the old 10-hole homes. That building was bigger at one point in time. If you look at it, when it gets there, the back half, that's way in the back of the neighborhood, is cut out like an L shape. Looks like somebody took a chunk out of it. I was the person that took the chunk out of it because those windows were too close to the neighbors in the back, and they replaced those units that they lost in that cutout piece. to the ground floor in the front of the building. And that was a suggestion that came up in the meeting, and I, think it looks great, and everybody was happy at the time. I like to kind of sort of run our meetings. I call it like ESPN, where everyone's allowed to talk. If you ever watch ESPN or anybody in football, nobody ever talks over anybody. One guy talks, the next guy talks, the next guy talks, so it kind of makes it easier. Everyone gets their point across. And you try to kind of have equal time, because people do have either similar views or opposite views or other suggestions. Some of the things that I think where you guys are definitely, well, the things that we're working on right now that are on the horizon are like Oxford School is on the horizon. We've had a couple different meetings with those people. Some plans are out there way back when Brenner was the superintendent, and that's where they got the option 1, option 2, option 3. The option we're going with now, I think, is an entire scrape of the project and start all over again. We did put in a municipal overlay zone that was already existing in town, and we placed that on every single one of the schools and I think fire stations in town. So it gives the latitude of the architects and building committees and whatnot to be able to use the different setback requirements. That zoning designation was derived when they built the library, which is at least 15 years ago, right? It's at least 10 years ago. I used to get my gas there way back when. And it was also used at Old Town Hall Homes. We put it on that site, and now it's on, which is not a road, now it's on a bunch of different projects. They have not sent us anything yet. They did a pretty good job, I think, with the committee that they came up with. One of the neighbors that's going to be directly affected is on the committee. So the way the zoning code is written, for certain requirements, they can go as close as 10 feet to that guy's house by shortening the setback. That guy's on the committee. If you look at the site, it would never do that anyway. And they don't plan on doing that anyway, but there are latitudes there to do it. I was on the people that pushed for, and it actually really came through the RTM, pushed to buy 32 White Street, which is next door to Home School. If you ever went by a Home School, there was a house in the parking lot. That house, they never bought it. They were supposed to buy it a long time ago. It came on the market for sale. Eventually, the town bought it, and it was knocked down immediately. By having that house allows the school to expand that way into that whole big piece, because there's a piece next to it, and the zoning code will allow that too. The thing relative to schools, and it's really not us, but it's in general, all the schools in town are basically kind of sort of the same size. Each one's got the same number of students that they're supposed to, the elementary schools. So the fact that you can expand, Oxbridge or Homeschool or one of those to add in another 100 kids, that's going to make it out of balance between the other schools, and it's going to create more traffic in that area. So I don't think anything like that would ever happen. But I do know at Oxbridge, I think ELP is supposed to go there. And if you watch any stuff on TV, they want all third graders to start going to pre-K. So that's just something that's going to come down the pipe. What else do we want to talk about? The other one that's out there is Pear Tree Point. We've never really seen anything on Pear Tree Point. I've read the papers and see the thing that's going on. No one has ever consulted the Planning and Zoning Commission.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. But they have consulted the planning and zoning directors, which is the paid staff in town. Our staff is, I think it's about 8 people in total. There's a couple planners, a couple directors, a couple admins, and then the building inspector. So there are a lot of people there, so a lot of people we can talk to. But the only thing I would say about that, and it's going to come up at one point in time, we don't get into any cost analysis of anything. People can build a $5 million house in a flood zone, and if they want to do it, knock yourself out. It may or may not work. If it matters, if it matches up with the zoning code, they're allowed to do it. At Pear Tree Point, everyone knows that it's in a flood zone. you can build in a flood zone. Half of the road bays in a flood zone. Jan actually had to lift her house. I approved the lifting of her house and so we can get it out of the flood zone. So that whole part of town isn't there. There's a lot very expensive houses in the bay and along that point and like Contentment Island that are in flood zones, so it happens all the time. If the town wants to build a flood zone, you have to do certain aspects of the plan to make it right, and it's legal. Whether the RTM or somebody else doesn't want to build $1 million, building inside a flood zone, that's a whole different conversation. It's got nothing to do with us. What else did I want to talk about a little bit? Some of the things that we do look after is, and it's a little bit, you look at it with I personally look at it being a trained professional with a sharp eye, is the feasibility of a project. You could ask Federal Realty, or you could ask, David Genovese, or you can ask anybody to do this, this, and this. Everything that you ask them to do is an additional cost. One example that I will give you is the Maplewood project. If you ever go by Maplewood, which is the assisted living thing that's on the corner, that's kind of sort of catty corner from Trader Joe's, they wanted to do an expansion. They bought the building next door, which was it was like Abercrombie Insurance Company. They bought that property, and I have the number what it paid for it. When they came to us, they did a simple design to expand the building. We made them redesign it because they didn't have a portico share into the property. Like all the other ones, you drive in, there's an overhang, you drop off your mother, your grandmother, your aunt, or your uncle, or your father, and then you move out. And theirs, they didn't plan for that. So if you drop them off, or you have a FedEx truck, or you have some truck, you would park it on the street. The post road, you really don't want to do that. So we had them redesign it. They redesigned it. It was probably expensive what they did. They ended up not doing the project anyway. I don't know if that was one of the factors or not, but it's definitely something that matters to them. That market today there's a lot of people building a senior housing for that stuff, which is assisted living. Like Atria did an expansion. There's the new one that we approved with 101 units, which is the old Parklands building, and then Maplewood, and then around our surrounding towns, there's a whole bunch of them being built. They're really expensive to go to, but when you put super designs and requirements on people, it gets more expensive. For example, another thing that we'll get into in a second is like the federal project. That project, we required it sort of way back. They have to, part of that project approvals, they have to fix the flooding, or try to do as much fixing of the flooding on Heights Road as possible. That project's going to cost somewhere between $110 and $120 million. That's like $600 a square foot. That's really expensive. And a lot of that stuff we're never going to see because it's underground. So things like that comes up. David Genovese, he's rerouting a river and a culvert it's kind of underground. You can't even see it. It's underground where Gopher Ice Cream is, as part of his project. That's stuff that we have had nothing to do with.
Why is that so expensive?
There's a lot of permitting and there's a lot of costs involved. Supposedly, if you across the street, it's called Brook Street. Nobody knew why it was called Brook Street. There was apparently a brook there. So, and if you look at it now, there's between the Tibbetts building, which is on Corbett Drive, and the parking lot that's behind 1020, you can't get there. There is an easement to go over it, but it's because there's a river that runs back there. He's got rights to go over that river. He's always had rights to go over that river, but nobody's ever used it. That's why you can drive around, which is a pain to me, because I go to the Goose or one of those places, and to get there, you got to come all the way around. There's no entrance. But part of that stuff gets baked into some of these projects, and Micah would know it gets really expensive. But our town is a great town. People are investing into it all the time. And these are some of the things that we look at and have to be cognizant of. I'm no specialist in hydrology, but when we do our projects, we have engineers and third-party consultants and all these reports that say how it's going to work and how it's supposed to work. 98% of the time, the professionals are right. There's that 2% of the time that's not. if you've ever been to McGuan Field, that was and when driving to the parking lot, there's been a river that's been there for 4 years. Because somebody built the house, they didn't have the right plans, and they found a spring at McGuan Field, right across when you went to the Heights into.
Yeah. I know where it is.
They've had 4 engineers on it to try to figure out where it's coming from and how to fix it. And
We had to do that in the Heights. We had what we called we had to mitigate the flooding that went from the old building down towards Rings End.
yeah,
And it greatly increased the cost of building
yeah,
that affordable housing. But it did do what it was supposed to do, which was,
right.
there weren't any drains or anything in the old site. It just,
Right. That stuff's expensive, and the majority of our houses that are built in town don't have on-site drainage built into them. So anything that somebody does do when they build a new house or a new project, there's always drainage that goes there that stops the flooding. Like I said, I'm not an expert at that, but I'm pretty good at reading and understanding, and I've seen it enough times to know if it's gonna work or not gonna work. But, most of the time it does work, but that's what we have to try to dig into. There is a lot of paperwork. I'm gonna stop for a second and see if you guys have any questions at this point in time, and then I have a couple other pages just to look at to go to the 3 big projects. Amy, you want to read it?
No, Carolyn, I saw
Well,
her name.
I had a question about one thing you said, which was the Pear Tree Beach project. How is it that the town didn't come to the Planning and Zoning Commission
right.
to embark on a big project like that? Never mind the cost, but just the whole concept. Why is it that you weren't involved?
It's, at the beginning, well, certain aspects, relative to that specific one, there's a master plan that somebody did to design it. And those guys did what they did. The code is existing, right? So you can look at the existing code, and most of the professionals that get hired to do stuff like that, they'll get all their ducks in a row and figure it out and look at the code. The FEMA flood map codes, that's a federal thing. Like I did, way back when, I did the addition of the tennis building at the Middlesex Club. The new tennis building, we drive in, it's in a flood zone. And if you look at it, there's a concrete wall, it's 4 feet high. That's why it's designed like that. We had all the architects and all the people design it, and then once it's finished, the design, then you go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and say, this has been designed, this is certified, it matches all your regulations.
So that's the process, they would come to you after the design has been chosen?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's-
Relative to the Oxford School, they came in at the very beginning to do what's called a pre-hearing meeting. A lot of the hearing meetings, and whatnot, that's all state regulated. You're allowed to have a pre-hearing meeting, either in public at, a general planning and zoning commission meeting, or in the office. And Oxbridge did that at the beginning, so this is what we're thinking of. If you want to add anything out of this, any quick ideas that you should, meet. Sometimes they'll have their architects there, if the architects prefer you. Sometimes it's just what I would call lay people. I mean, Michael's been in the business, I just found out for a while. And on that committee, Diane Boston is an architect. She's been on, I thought Kip Coombs was some kind of trained architect, but most people have a sense of what's going on.
Could I add on to your question? You mentioned building in the FEMA's, in the flood zone. What my question is that if our house existed in the flood zone, then it existed more in the flood zone when FEMA redid the map, and we lifted our house 58 inches. Stop laughing, Michael. But one of the things that bothers me is that you guys approved our plan to raise the house. We're taking the risk, as you pointed out. If I want to build in the flood zone, that's fine. But isn't there any difference when a community builds in the flood zone? I mean, for example, if you take New Roten Yacht Club, we put in an elevator. They're talking about an elevator just around the corner from us on Pear Tree. But if our elevator gets flooded, it's on us.
Right.
If my house gets flooded, it's on us. Isn't there anything that that distinguishes between a public thing, like if they put the elevator in, it's gonna be on our tax dollars. Isn't there any difference in building in a flood zone if an individual is making that decision, or if a town is putting additional operating costs into, is there nothing there?
Not in the eyes of the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's got nothing to do with us.
That would be a decision by the RTM in approving it, and selectmen, if they decide that's a risk and an ongoing operational cost they want to incur, that's a decision like they'd make any other operational cost.
That's an
can tell you from
appropriation decision.
From where I've sit, I've seen it done before successfully. All the train stations in Westchester County, my area of expertise in work has been Westchester County for 25 years. I've probably done almost every single new residential project from Yonkers all the way up to Poughkeepsie. That's on the water, it was all industrial land. All those train stations got redone as part of it. All those train stations have elevators that go up and over, and they're all in flood zones. You know, so they've been building train stations on the Hudson line, you know, in Westchester County with elevators in flood zones since I can remember. You know,
I think it's a little different though with this, you don't get, in those flood zones, you
But
don't get
my-
wind and.
Right, my point, it's gonna work. You know, it's gonna work. It can work. And I've seen it work before. Relative to getting wind and whatnot, the one in
but I-
Tarrytown when Sandy came, it was 8 feet underwater.
Well, it was Terrytown, right, yeah,
In Irvington, the Irvington train station.
right.
Because Cushman Wakefield was the property manager of a thing called Bridge Street Properties. And that's had a train station. And that brand new train station, everything was underwater. So they're there today. That's got nothing to do with us. The only thing I would, when I look at the plans, I would say, hey, listen, I've seen it done this way, I've seen it done that way, and make suggestions. And like last night, we had an application for a house that's going to be subdivided up on, or a lot that's asked to be subdivided up on Pablo Tree Ridge Road. They had they had a land planner. Excuse me. They had a land planner which was Seymour Architects, Seymour Surveying. They did it first. Then they brought in Devesta Engineering to do another set of plans. And then they brought in a soil scientist to look at the wetlands. Then we brought in, but then we had the town people look at it, which is Darren Ostafine from the Public Works Department. He chimed in. The health department chimed in. The fire department chimed in. And then we had a guy named Joe Canis that works for Time Bond. He wrote 5 letters to go over this plan. This is just for one guy who's got a house that's on 5 acres of land in a 2-acre zone that wants to subdivide it. So when we eventually gets to us, so many people have looked at it. It's definitely not a rubber stamp by any stretch of the imagination.
I know.
It's not. Yeah, it's
I know.
not. But we're comfortable with people that have looked at it and professionals that have looked at it.
Can you give an overview of, just a quick update on the 3 major projects that
Yep.
are happening, commercial projects in town? And then also, I would like to talk a little bit also about the moratorium expiration for affordable housing in Darien, and what that might mean for us as a committee to pay attention to and keep our radar up for.
Sure, that's a great idea. Which project do you want to do first?
Just, you can do the Reader's Digest high-level summary. We have
Okay.
a lot of new folks here.
Okay. I'll just go over that Jeremy gave it to me. The Federal Realty Project. On Martin Luther King Day, they knocked down the prison building, which is across the street from what I call Texaco. It's now the Shell gas station. That one came down.
What
That-
came down?
The Prism, the house that's behind,
Chase
house is
Bank.
behind Chase
Yeah.
Bank.
It was that
It was
The
that Chase
little
Bank
yellow
company.
house.
Yeah.
Okay.
We called it the Prism House.
Between
It's the
the-
Prism
the
House.
gas
Yeah,
station and Chase.
I know what
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
It's not part of it. I don't think Bob's Auto Body, which is next door to it, that's not part of the project. You probably saw before Christmas, the Greenwich Hospital building on Heights Road was taken down. That's where there's a new parking lot there that's striped. Federal has pulled the permits to build the new Walgreens which is gonna go in the parking lot between the existing Walgreens and Equinox. They're gonna take away parking, that's why I think they put the parking in the front of the project. I've been told, well, the Stop and Shop closed, right, on December 18th, something like that.
Yeah.
I looked at, I thought that it was one continuous building, because way back when, and just being in the real estate business, Walgreens is a subtenant of Stop and Shop. It was at one point in time, that was a bigger building. It was all before our time. To me, it looked like it was one building. I looked at it the other day, it's two separate buildings with a firewall between the two. So I was told that the Stop and Shop building is gonna come down before the Walgreens. Walgreens will not be closed for more than, if at all, one day. Because they will not, they'll open the brand new building, have it tenanted and set up, ready to go before they close the building. So Walgreens will never close. What else is going on there? Equinox, same thing, that one's never closing.
The Equinox building is staying?
Yes.
Yeah.
They just renovated the inside, anything outside of Equinox. What is it again? The underground drainage system, which is what I talked about earlier. They're basically going to put a bathtub in the parking lot where Stop and Shop is and where we all parked our cars, because the water's supposed to come off Heights Road and go into these. They're called culvert. No, they're called Cultex. They're basically underground bathtubs where the water goes in there and then eventually goes out. As part of that plan, and I don't know where the timing comes in that, I mean, it's kind of related but not related. Across the street from Valvallis, the deli is a big part of that. It sits up high. That's also supposed to have some kind of flood mitigation in there at some point in time. So when the train station gets redone, that should get redone too. It's two separate people paying for it, it's two separate people doing it, but it's the town engineer, which is Ed Gentile, who's working hand in hand with them because the system's got to be the same. Palmer's, which is next door, if you ever look at Palmer's is on the other side of Edgerton. It's actually not in the flood zone. People really don't know that. I think there's a tiny bit of the Palmer's parking lot in front, which is where Dynamic Fitness is or was, and now the new post office truck sits. Part of that was in a flood zone, but they're not touching that. Everything else is I would say, to the left of it, which is actually further south. That's not in the flood zone, so they're not doing anything. Palmer's had their groundbreaking. All their financing is set up. They told us, and it was in my speech, that it's like that's a $40 million project. They redesigned it a little bit. That was another feasibility thing. We can talk about that later. They wanted to put below grade parking in that project, so you got to dig down to Lake China. That's really, really expensive. They approved it, they designed it. We actually had them redesign certain things there too. And like I said earlier, I've been in business seeing a lot of new buildings built. The biggest problem with all the new construction that's in downtown Stanford that's on the water, it's called the Harper Point District, is the package rooms are too small. So when you walk in, those buildings are brand new, some of them are like 4 years old. All the FedEx boxes, all the Amazon boxes are all sitting in the lobby. So as they build new ones, they make those rooms bigger. When the guys came for the Palmer's project and they worked on it for 4 years, I said, "Where's the package room with your plans?" "We don't have one." I was like, "How do you not have a package room in a brand new apartment building?" They didn't even have a parking spot for the trucks where you drop off the packages and you're moving in a couch. So part of those things that we redesigned when they did the feasibility part, they were supposed to have a store, which is, for argument's sake, say it was a Starbucks, which is the highest ranked tenant on the corner of Hollow Tree Ridge Road and Heights Road. And it was going to be their, prime corner. That landed up, they had to dig below that, because if you ever look at it, that's what the liquor store is now, but it would have been clipped, they had to dig below that. They decided to take out that storefront, and there's going to be parking on that spot. But it's going to be screened. So it's not going to be in there. So the building will be closer to the corner, but that's another item that hasn't come up in front of us that you have to look out for.
Can I ask you one question?
Of course you can.
What is the timing on the related project and the Palmer's project?
The federal project.
I mean, the federal, sorry.
Yeah, same, related, they're both
Yeah.
big companies that do
Yeah.
the same thing. They're both kind of sort of starting at the same time. Federal has publicly said that their stabilization date, I think, is 2023.
What does that mean, the stabilization date?
When it's done.
Complete.
Construction for all three of these projects are probably 2 years. To get tenants in there is at least another year after that. The apartments typically rent, around here, apartments typically rent about 20 units a month. I think in total, the number of apartments we're adding in that part of town is, I think it's 159, if my memory's correct. So the apartments end up getting leased before some of the retail spaces. Palmer's and Federal have not announced any tenants at all yet. My perception and my professional guess is that there's going to be a small grocery store concept in there that is a division of what Stop and Shop is. Stop and Shop's company it's the name of the company that owns Stop and Shop is from I think the Netherlands, called Credit Ahoy. They changed the name in the last couple of years. They have owned, I think, 10 supermarkets that go from the really big ones, which is Giant Foods, down to the small ones that are up in Westport. When you looked at the plans, most supermarkets are 40,000 square feet. When I looked at the plans, there was no 40,000 square foot box. I think the biggest box was 15,000 feet, and that's like a Trader Joe's size. So they have a site that's designated for a supermarket, but it's going to be more of a Trader Joe's size, and then one of their other concepts, because that tenant per se is this largest or second largest tenant in Federal Realty's overall portfolio. I think their largest tenant is Bed Bath & Beyond, but they've got relationships with those guys for years. Some of the tenants may come back and may move. Most of them did find homes in other parts of town, but they've not made any announcements on what they're going to do there. Palmer's, we know, obviously Palmer's is not leaving. I think part of their plan is to maybe renovate that store a little bit. They're always constantly renovating the inside, and they'll probably do something to the outside to match the new building. We really didn't get into that. That ends up going architecture review board. They get into the weeds on that, which is, for them, it's really fun. And there are a couple architects on that board. What else do I have? We're coming down,
Morgan.
facing the Road Heights. The zoning and building permits were dropped. The new building permits to build the new Palmer's project were dropped off from the P&Z department earlier. The demolition permits have been started, but the permits have not been issued yet. The liquor store moved out or closed recently, so that whole building from the post office down to the liquor store can come down. The other building that goes from the dry cleaners back to where Ed Tuning's store was, that building can come down. As you probably don't know, they're not touching the Wells Fargo building in front. That doesn't get touched. Either does Valvallis, that parking lot there, and those two little buildings that are in the front of Dakota Edgerton. What else?
David's project.
David's project. He finally has all of his federal, state, and local approvals for his project. Because that's so close to I-95, he had to go up to the state, and I think the feds got involved because I-95 is right there and it creates traffic. That's where the culvert came in. The Army Corps of Engineers got involved in that thing after our approvals were done. He closed his financing for his project, I think, right around Christmas. So I think he's ready to go in terms of that aspect too. The way that project's going to work is, we got a note from him the other day. Behind Helen Anson's and that strip of stores, There's, if you ever go back in there, is where the Dairy and Shoe Shop is, where you get Shoe Shop. That building's coming down, those parking garages next to it, all those doors, those buildings are gonna come down next. That's gonna be his staging area for all the construction and parking that's gonna happen across the street. The first project that's supposed to get done is, I call it the left side of Corbin Drive, which goes from the gas station all the way back to Old Kings Highway. Where the Tibbetts building is in there, and then I think there's like a Taekwondo place in there. That whole section comes down, and he's gonna build that building there first. He also, right around Christmas, I think maybe the beginning of the new year, he bought, I think 36 or 34 Old Kings Highway. If you go down Old Kings Highway, there's a bunch of office buildings there. There's a White House that sits in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
I never recognized it, and he bought that building. The plan is it's not 100% official, but he's working on it. He's working on an application, is to raise that building and put a new other office building there. He can get approvals today to build an office building there, or an apartment or mixed-use building, but he may not build it for 4 years. So I think that's also going to be used as a construction access and parking to come into the project. That's on that side of the street. Because he owns his group owns 2 other office buildings on that street, and that's where you're gonna have better access into the back of there.
And less disruptive to the post road.
Right,
Yeah, good.
right. Because
Less
one of the,
disruptive to the post road. That's good.
yeah, one of the things that is important, and we look at it, but don't look at it, is a lot of the staging, the phasing of these things, because they're so big, we have to be cognizant of that. It really came to light for us when we did Parklands, the new assisted living thing off of Old Kings Highway. That was a 60,000 square foot office building that got converted into a 100,000 square foot assisted living facility. There's a lot of in and out. There was traffic that was going on, and there's trucks going in, and there's a lot of pieces that have to go in a row. Craig Flaherty, who's a resident in town, also a professional engineer for NSME, he works on a lot of these projects professionally, and he gets paid. He's also a volunteer too, and he's really good. He designed the phasing plan for that, and he also designed the phasing plans for Federal and Palmer's. There's a phasing plan that was done by, I think, I forget who did it, another engineer in town that does it for David's project. The phasing is important because we never want to have the town underparked, right? Everyone argues about parking in town anyway. So if you start throwing construction vehicles and contractors, all kinds of stuff, those guys have to go someplace. So you have to knock down buildings, create parking, and then the parking guys go there, but it's not going to affect anything else. You can see that today, which is what happened over in the Heights, where they knocked down the one medical building. And they're gonna move the parking from left to right, that's why it's straight.
Is Papa John doing both the Palmers and the federal project? That's what I had heard, that's gonna be the same general contractor doing both. So, you know, the managing of those 2 sites that are such in close proximity, is it in fact being done by one?
That, I'm not 100% sure. I'm 99% sure that Papa John's is doing David's on the post road.
Okay.
I met the guy who's the lead guy for Palmer's. He's been building buildings around New York City and the boroughs and other parts of Connecticut for years. He really seems to know what he's doing as a project manager. Those guys hired a bunch of staff. I don't know if Federal's using an outside company or not.
Okay.
The woman that was at one of your RTM meetings that I was at, she said she's running the show. And she came over from Far City Ratner. Far City Ratner was one of my clients, and they rebuilt all this shopping centers in Brooklyn and Queens and all the boroughs in Bronx and the Home Depots in the Bronx.
Okay.
So if that's the same person, you know, they may not need a project, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah, that's what I said. EPOD, pause, reflect, the guards behind her coming down to the post office. That's the construction permits. What happens when they rebuild, when Corbin District gets rebuilt, they rebuild the left side of Corbin Drive. Some of those new tenants that are in quote-unquote pop-up stores, those guys are supposed to move into the new locations on the other side. Like Barrett Bookstore might move across the street. They're spending all kinds of money to move tenants from the left side to the right side and back and forth. When you do construction projects, I don't know if I think you guys were around here when the YMCA rebuilt it. Where the gym is now, for the gymnastics, that was the school. It cost them millions of dollars just to have that school moved to where it is and then moved back again. David Genovese is doing that for probably 15, 20 tenants, which is crazy, but.
He wants to keep some of those tenants, like he doesn't want
Yeah.
Barrett Books to go away,
Yeah.
so.
Tenants pay the rent. That's right. I think the plan that he's executing, I think it's very well thought out. All three of them are very well thought out. I think his is very well thought out because a lot of it is pre-leased. He does have the anchor tenant that he's supposed to have. That's the clothing company from Maine.
Who is it?
It's a clothing company
No,
out of Maine.
what's the name of it?
I don't know. It's just a clothing
LL
company.
Bean?
in Maine. Maybe. I don't know.
I think
I've never
it's-
seen anything about it.
Where is the post office going to be?
I don't know.
Because
I was wondering.
Yeah.
my office has a PO box at the current
Yeah.
post office, and every time I go in there, they're like, we don't know. So
The
I just
post
don't know if
office
there's
is
any kind of-
The post office is and was a big tenant of my firm, JLL, which is another firm in town, and Cushman & Wakefield. They want their post office to be about 2,000 square feet.
What is it now?
It's like 9,000 feet.
They're closer to 10.
The mail sorting is gone way down. The big post office that services our district is on Kemp Avenue. They put a ton of money into building that thing. And it's underused. So what the post office is supposed to do is, I think the new post office is already underneath Palmer's. They put the sign up the other day. I've not been inside there. But what the post office wants to do is, have PO boxes in place where you can get stamps and talk to the postman, but the mail sorting gets done someplace else. I worked on a huge deal in downtown New Rochelle with JLL and Brian Higgins, where there's a post office in the middle of town.
So will there only be one post office then?
I think there will be two.
Oh.
There should be one in Darien and downtown, and then the Heights one. But I think the mail sorting, the trucks that are parked there, I think they're all going someplace else. The real estate's just too valuable, and that was a lease that they never owned out. I can keep talking, but you guys are probably getting bored.
No? Can you also give a summary of what, to the extent
the
that we know
moratorium.
about the moratorium, when that will be expiring and what that might potentially mean for,
Yeah, there's that one thing I want to make sure that you guys keep your eyes on too.
okay?
Relative to the moratorium, we had the first moratorium, which started probably 10 years ago, was done under Dave Campbell's watch, and I think Jamie's been the first secretary, I think 10 years, so that's at least 10 years ago. Time does fly.
Forever.
We got the second moratorium because they found other projects that we built. I think when the current moratorium expires, we don't have enough points to extend it again. The actual expiration date of the moratorium, I don't know offhand, but when units come online, such as the Royal, those are senior affordable. The way the point count get, for a senior affordable housing unit, you get like half a point. For some of the 3 bedrooms that are inside Allen O'Neill, you get like 3 points. There's also different levels of income, which is, it's called AMI and SMI. AMI means area median income, and SMI means state median income. The least expensive apartments are the state, or like 50% of state median income. For argument's sake, say the state median income is $30,000. Somebody that makes 50% is $15,000. That's what those are designed for. if you have someone that has those units, their rent is really low and you get a lot of points. If you have 100% of area median income, that's somebody that's really close to what the regulars, for argument's sake, Darian's median income is $100,000. It would be 100% of that or 90% of that. So the person makes $90,000 a year, which is in the national picture, that's a big number. Those you don't get a whole lot of points for.
Those couldn't move in under the current laws anyway. We
Yeah.
could not rent, we couldn't rent to anyone at
Right.
that level. We generally rent to 30%, well, I mean, I'm not on it anymore,
Right.
but I was on it
For a
2
long
years
time.
ago. We usually look at 30% AMI is what we're
That's who you targeted for.
what we're generally renting at. And
Right.
we got, actually, and I think this may have been, I'm not sure this ever came to P&Z, but we were able, on the Housing Authority, to deal with the AMI as opposed to the state median income, because there's a huge variation between what it costs to live in Darien and what it costs to live in upstate Connecticut or some of them. So that was a fight, or not a fight. That's been a discussion, not just of ours, but New Canaan, Wilton, all of the high living cost places. And we use the Housing Authority now uses AMI.
Great. David's project, Federal and Palmer's are putting their affordable units on site. When we did the application, I don't remember 100%, those requirements are already in there. So it's state AMI or area AMI, 50%, 60%, 40%. I did a deal in downtown White Plains where they had 100% AMI in downtown White Plains. They couldn't find people to fill those apartments because the level of income that is at is very close to what market is. And then you have to go through all kinds of hoops to be able to get that apartment, and they're usually small. But to your point is, David's project, he's building part of his affordable units off-site, and for lack of a better word, it's going to be called something similar to the cottages, over off of Parklands behind the interstate access off of Old Kings Highway. That is supposed to be, I think it's 10 affordable units for special needs adults. And we as a commission, our policy, it's not written just a policy, is we're not out there, we're telling people to build these things, we're not chasing moratorium points. Right? We're not saying you have to build, 30% of SMI so we can get 6 points for all of your units. You build what you want to build, and it goes in there. Relative to David's project, I forget the number of points you kind of get for that, but you're serving a need to the community. What you get in terms of points in the moratorium, you get what you get. It is what it is. But that's where they're going to come in. David's project will come online, Heights will come online, the Royal will come online, Federal will come online. All those will come online, but I don't think.
They're also increasing the denominator.
Yeah, you increase the denominator. Yeah, it's a numerator denominator problem. You increase the denominator, but I think when you get those points, the units have to be occupied and finished, and that's when you can put it in the application. So we know they're all coming. So there could be a window of time between when the current moratorium ends and we can apply for the next one. There was a discussion at one point in time where you can only get 2. Any town ever can get 2. That's gone away. It's never been proved that there's a 2 limit on any town. So we're under the premise that we can be able to go for a 3rd one. The game is not really to get moratoriums for the rest of your life. The game is for us to build affordable housing in town. I think the housing authority is doing a great job of it. From a planning position, we have looked in the town plan and conservation resort of certain areas in town where we want to be able to put affordable housing. I would rather, from where I sit, be in control, say we think this is a good spot to put it. You should put it there versus some applicant come to us and say, hey, we want to put it on, Ox Ridge Road, or we want to put it on some other spot where somebody else chooses and we have to do it. I would rather be proactive and say, put it here. But, I mean, we all know that the land is scarce in town. And from where I sit, like I said earlier, I don't have any money. You guys have the money. If you say, hey, we want to buy, a $2 million piece of land and put affordable housing there because we think it's a good thing to do, the RTM can do it. We can.
Talking about building in appropriate and not appropriate places, and what's happening in terms, that building that's built across from the Coombs parking lot and across from, that there was originally a Stefanoni project. I was assuming
That's a
that.
good segue, because that's one last thing that's on my list.
Okay.
One of the things that I want to focus on, and I want you guys to focus on, your committee at some point in time during the budget season are going to approve the planning and zoning department's budget. It's like, the salaries go up some percentage, sometimes they ask for a new body, so that's a new head count that's getting added. This year, I don't think they're doing that at all. They'll put in there, like, we need a copier, we need something, they buy more pencils, whatever they do, and you guys get that. One of the fudge numbers when I was on your committee was lawsuits. There are a couple pending lawsuits in town, and what Jan's speaking about is one of them. Right
What
now,
were you
we're
referring to? What page?
Seven-
The
771.
Pemberton 16.
Oh.
It's
Pemberton
on
16,
Roy and
Pemberton
Looks like
16.
it's much
Okay.
too close to the
Yeah.
road in every direction, and it doesn't look to me like it's rented.
It is. We have some real estate professionals will be able to tell us that.
No, but, I mean, is that completely rented? I've never
Not
seen it.
fully, no.
I heard it was
Well, that's-
allowed.
There's quite a few still online.
I want to check, I want to touch on that for a second.
Okay, sure.
There's a thing called rented, there's a thing called full, and there's a thing called stabilized, and a thing called vacant, right? The vacancy rate in our area is about 6%. Any building that is fully occupied, there's probably, the rents are probably too low. Any building that's, half empty, the rents are probably too high. People are smart, everyone watches their own dollar. If they wanted to build as condos and the quality wasn't there and the prices were too high, nobody's gonna buy it. There are market forces in there. In terms of planning and zoning, we have the ability to look only at affordable housing project to see if it's feasible. If someone comes in, they say they want to buy a piece of land, they want to build a Taj Mahal, and then they're going to rent it out to affordable housing people, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that it's not feasible. I was not on the commission when that building was built, but there were other projects that came up, and it came into the feasibility factor. David's project, which is on that part off of Parklands, the question of feasibility came up on that thing, but that's not an 830G application. So whether he wants to build it because he's a nice guy, that's fine.
What's happening in that building I asked about?
The building we're asking about, it's in the courts right now. There was a hearing or a conference call.
What is the,
The issue is that building got approvals, it was denied by the town, it got approved by the state judge for affordable housing under the 830G law. It was designed and approved as a 62 and over apartment complex, which is 30% affordable. It was designed as a multifamily building. Multifamily buildings can either be rental or they can be condos. So it was designed as a multifamily building, they can do whatever they want. When they came out of the ground, they marketed it as condominiums. So right now there's 16 tax lots there. They sold the first, I think it's, 5. 30% of 16 is 5 units. The first 5 apartments were sold on an affordable basis. One of the guys that put an affordable apartment in there is actually a friend of mine. He was my vendor on another project, and those 5 apartments got sold. They sell those, I think, sold somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000
For the affordable ones.
for the affordable ones. The
The
asking
market
price
ones were much higher.
were about $750, I think. It was like $650 a square foot. I'm a square footage guy. nobody bought them.
They started much higher, where
They started at one
They started much
number.
closer to
875.
900,000.
Were they?
Yes, they started much closer.
They had one set of numbers out there.
875.
Yeah, I think it was 875, but
Yeah.
I was buying it for my mother at the time, and
Yeah, they were,
there's no way we're looking at
started
this.
out there.
Yeah. They had one set of numbers and they pulled it off and they put it back on a higher set of prices. Long story short, they rented the apartments. There's 11 apartments that are for rent. When I checked the last couple of times, I think 2 were empty. You rent an apartment for a year. So at one point in time, all 11 were probably rented. You know, somebody moved into the last one was empty, it was never occupied, and somebody moved out of another one. So it's never going to be 100% occupied. And most buildings are not 100% occupied. So relative to being available for lease, it was finished 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
Easily.
Easily, right? So they were all rented at one point in time. The lawsuit in court right now is the bank, the guy who built it brought in a first mortgage and a second mortgage. The guy defaulted on the mortgage, on the first mortgage and on the second mortgage. The guy on the second mortgage bought the first mortgage at a discount. So now an investor owns all the paper and he owns the building. He, but through his counsel, or came to Darien and said, we want to change to 62 and over down to 55 and more parking. We denied the application because his argument was it was underparked and it was a feasibility issue because he couldn't sell the apartments, couldn't rent the apartments. That's not our problem. You know, we're not the Darien Feasibility Commission. He invested in it, he bought it, he did what he did.
It's a bad investment.
Yeah, it is what it is. The bank got wiped out and the bank got wiped out. So we denied it, plus from where I sit, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't even think it's our jurisdiction because we never approved it. The judge approved it and said you have to do this. The only thing we did was the town, who required by a court order to change the zoning on that spot. I think it's called AH like 77 or something. It has its own different zoning designation. So that's going through the court system now. But we have the position is it's 62 and over. They want it 62 and over. You know, the legal case is where you guys come in. It's all public knowledge. They said our definition of 62 and over doesn't follow federal law. Okay, if it doesn't, we can fix it. You know, but the thing relative to going back to where it kind of sort of started was with lawsuits in town. The planning and zoning department as a whole does spend a lot of money on lawyers. When you see the budget that's going to come across your desk, I don't think the lawsuit legal fees are in there. If it is, it's a plug number that's at the bottom. And it can go from, $50,000 to 1 year when I was on your committee, $350,000. That's a lot of textbooks.
Which lawyers do you use? I know Wilder Gleason's on the
Correct.
BMW's expanding.
We use the same general outside counsel that when you go to the planning and zoning, when you go to RTM meetings, that guy that's sitting up there, it's his firm. So relative to the fees, the town gets a great rate, because they look at the entire town. And we do use the council for a lot of reasons that we want them. Like every once in a while, we'll send them a commission, we'll send the town planning council, reach them out and say, can you read this in advance and see if we're doing it right? And we get charged for it. But the thing that I don't like is when someone throws in a lawsuit that's either a good lawsuit or a frivolous lawsuit, and we have to spend legal fees that we don't want to. Going back to where we started a long time ago relative to flood zones, we denied a house on the corner of Brookside and the Post Road that's directly across from Maplewood because they wanted to build in a flood zone. We got sued for it, they lost, because they're allowed to build in a flood zone. So that's a case where we might have made a bad decision and it ended up costing the town money for legal fees to fight the case by lawsuit. So when you do look at the budget, and it comes across, look at that number. I want to take a look at it too because I don't like getting sued by people. The last chairman, John Cini, he was really good at it too. He wanted to make sure that we did everything in our power to make sure when we had the decision that it's not something that will later backwards, or get sued on it. So that's why it's there, but we do use those people to review stuff because we want them to make sure we're right.
Just had a surgery, so.
I think that's it. BMW is just an application that's going on. It's the self-storage buildings and other applications going on. They're out there.
All right,
Okay.
terrific. Thank you so much for your time. We
Thanks.
really, really appreciate getting everybody grounded.
The last commercial I will give to you is, and I brought it up once before, the public comment thing. There's in the Board of Education, there's a public comment section. If anyone wants to come in and ask a question, you're welcome to come in and ask the people on the Board of Education. If you want to go up to the selectmen, have a public comment, you're allowed to do it. We're going to institute that in probably once a month in the Planning and Zoning Commission, and our first time it's going to be on the agenda is going to be our next meeting, which is the 28th. A public comment section. So if you want to just come up to the podium and say, hey, Planning and Zoning Commission guys, you know.
Which I think is a really great thing for us to
Really
know,
good
because
thing.
as people approach us from
Yeah.
Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee, and they say, what's going on here, I have this opinion, that you all say to them, there's an
There's an
opportunity
opportunity
for
to
you
voice
to
Yeah.
have your voice heard once a month.
Once a month.
Once a month, that's.
You can't talk about existing applications if it's not a public hearing. You can talk about anything you really want to talk about, and there's a little bit of ground rules in there. But it was a big thing at the League of Women Voters Night. It came up in some meeting where they said no public comment in the meeting. It's open book. I mean, you guys voted for me to become this seat. If you like what I do, I get reelected. If you don't like what I do, I get chucked out. So, that's the
It's
way
free for nights a month then.
you know. But, so if you guys, when I was on your committee, we used to sit in on those meetings now. That's before the days of TV 79. And I'm on everybody's TV for a long time, and they do a great job. But if you want to come and speak, please do.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
And motion to adjourn? Okay, all right, meeting's adjourned.